We have the pleasure of welcoming Hannah Morgan today to our interview series. I'm Aishwarya Jain from the peopleHum team. Before we begin, just a quick intro of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work with AI and automation technologies. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Hannah Morgan is a job search strategist at careersherpa.net. She's also a regular contributor to US News and World Report. A greatly sought-after speaker and trainer, transforming thoughts is her passion. She has been recognized as one of LinkedIn's top voices in job search and career in 2019. She's also the co-founder of Career Navigator LLC. We are extremely happy to have someone of a stature to be in our interview series today. Welcome, Hannah. We're thrilled to have you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. A pleasure for us as well. So, Hannah, if you could just start with a little bit about your interesting work as a job search strategist. I don't think I've heard that many a times, and it's very interesting to me. So could you explain that concept a bit?
Yeah, so a lot of people, you probably are more familiar with the term job search coach. And coaching is a very different process. I'm a little bit more impatient. And so what I found as I was working with job seekers for over the course of my career is that a lot of people just didn't understand the process of what they would need to do. And so what I like to do is help them understand what is that process that you'll need to go through, and how do we customize it for your unique situation so that you can implement it. So I help them sort of develop the strategy up front and set them on their way. I don't do a lot of individual hand holding as they're going through, though the people that I work with do check back in with me and ask for follow-up advice and information. But the whole idea is developing a strategy to better navigate your job search so that you can be more in control and feel like you're empowered to make whatever change it is you want to make.
Wow, that is amazing. And I think, that'll really help a lot of candidates out there who are really struggling to get, the real organization that they want to work for, so like the whole matchmaking process is what we're trying to help them in. That's great. And there are so many sources where you can kind of look at jobs, right? You've got the job boards, you've got LinkedIn, and I don't know, like blogs or whatever. So how do you think candidates must approach these different sources, and which is the best, if there is a best?
Well, so I think one of the things that is hard to hear and hard to say is that you need to do a little bit of everything. Using one strategy only isn't going to be the answer. So I advise the clients that I work with, and my whole philosophy is start the job search by first understanding who you are and what you're good at doing, and then identify where you want to do that. So who are the companies that you would love to work for? And usually this is what stumps people, because they don't know what companies or organizations are out there that they could even work for. So that's a really important part of the process, because what we know, and the reason I start with this target list and asking clients and job seekers to start with this list of companies that they want to work for, is because a lot of companies don't advertise broadly and widely when they have a job opening. And especially when we're in circumstances where there are a lot of job seekers on the job market, employers don't want to have to manage that huge onslaught of candidates. It's time consuming and it's difficult. So oftentimes, and what we've known for years and years and years, is that companies prefer to hire referred candidates. Right? So an individual might learn about the job from a job board, but if they have that company on their target list, then they should already also have contacts inside of that company, or they can build targets. So using that power of a referral is such an important spot. So if you've got your target list, that sort of drives the activity. So you're going to research the company, you're going to monitor those companies on social media and in the news to see what they're doing and what they have going on. And then you're going to look for people using LinkedIn, because it's the greatest tool, who work for that company, so that you can strategically reach out and have conversations with people who can give you the inside scoop on what it's like to work there. So that's that whole process of the being proactive and identifying targets. Obviously, the job boards are great, and Indeed and LinkedIn are obviously, prime targets, and they make it pretty easy to go by. But I would not overlook the opportunity to tap into niche job boards that are specialized in recruiting people for specific industries or for specific roles. And likewise, even some recruiters, depending on the industry and the level of role, some companies do reach out to third-party recruiters to help them fill those jobs. So that means for a job seeker, there are a lot of different moving parts to managing all that and how you structure your time around that.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. And when you talk about researching a particular company, and you must spend some time to understand what is their social media presence or internet presence. Now, a lot of these companies also have reviews on their sites, like let's say Glassdoor. When you go on Glassdoor, it's like pros and cons of it. Now, how much of it should a candidate really believe in? When that person is researching.
Right. That's such a good question, because a lot of times people will say, uh-oh, one person gave this company a bad review, I don't want to work there. But that's not really accurate. We know they're anonymous reviews. In other words, the person is not putting their name to it, so it's not really transparent. And so anybody can say anything they want. And a lot of times what happens is that a disgruntled employee will leave a negative review, but there are just as many good reviews. So I think that if you're job searching and you're researching a company on Glassdoor, there is a lot of good information there. There's some insight, but I think that you sort of have to weigh it carefully. If there are bad reviews, how many are there? And if there are more good reviews, then lead with that. And I'll say that's just one. Glassdoor is a very good source of information, but it's not the only source, right? So if you find reviews that are not so favorable for a company, then that just means you have to ask questions around that situation when you reach out to somebody inside the company and begin having a conversation with them. So you're going to sort of validate any questionable information you uncover in real life conversations.
Absolutely. I think candidates must really understand that news on Glassdoor is generally very sensationalized and exaggerated, so it might not even be true. And that calls for being a little more proactive and finding out more information about the organization, as you said. So a candidate has multiple things in their portfolio, right? I mean, they'll have the resume, they'll have online presence. So how much of it, how much of what makes a real difference, and how should they present themselves to organizations?
Well, as we were talking, as I talked about the strategy being that having that proactive approach and networking with people, I would never recommend leading with your resume, because the resume just screams, hire me, I'm looking for a job. And when you're networking, you really can't tailor the resume because you don't know exactly what jobs are available and that kind of thing. So I really advise people not network with a resume. That's something that you use solely when you're applying for jobs. I guess if somebody asks you for one after you've met with them, you can certainly forward it along, but you'd want to get more information about, well, what kind of role do you think I should tailor this for? Because we all can have different emphasis based on the job, the company, the opportunity. So that has to get fine-tuned. The LinkedIn presence is really critical, right? Because we know that there are so many people on LinkedIn, and we know that recruiters go there. We know that even hiring managers and employees go there to look for people. So it is probably one of the most important places. It's on 24/7, right? And so your LinkedIn presence has to be really solid. You have to, your profile has to speak to all of the skills that you have, show examples of your work. It's almost like an online portfolio. You also want to make sure that you've got good recommendations written by people that you used to work with or work for. So there's a lot that can be done with LinkedIn. I think a lot of people just don't really appreciate how powerful LinkedIn is and how much employers and recruiters rely on that tool as a first sort of vetting candidates. So it's super important.
Absolutely right. And when you talk about those other social media channels like Facebook, there's Instagram. Now, candidates usually would not keep that professional. It's a little more personal. So do you think there is a judgment of bias that arises here if they do not like, if the recruiters just don't like the Instagram or Facebook account?
Yeah, I think that, but isn't bias a part of the whole interviewing process anyway? I mean, if they don't use their personal bias on the LinkedIn profile, they're going to use it somewhere else in the interview process. And so while it's unfortunate, yeah, you have to sort of think, okay, if somebody does go to look at my Facebook page, what will they find? I control that. The job seeker controls that. So I would just say, you know what, if somebody does go sleuthing for you using Google search and is looking for profile information, you control what they find. So if you don't want them to find things that can be used against you on Facebook, then don't put them there, hide them. And there are ways to be more private on Facebook. There are also ways to be more private on Instagram. I mean, so any platform that you're on, you control what people see. And if you're monitoring what other people are tagging you and things like that, you have a lot more control than I think people give themselves credit for. And I agree, it's not necessarily the best way for a company to learn about you, but if they're gonna do it, then be wise and make sure that you're aware of what they're gonna see.
Absolutely. And do you think that a lot of the graduates, what they do is that they just come out of college and then they're kind of just looking for jobs, just kind of at the last moment. Do you think job search is a continuous process? You really have to keep doing that all the time?
Yeah, we do have to keep doing it all the time. And I really wish that colleges and universities did a better job preparing students for their senior year, because it is an ongoing process. There are a lot of things that a job seeker who's in college needs to know about the world of work and what a culture might be like inside a company or within an industry. And you can't cram that into 8 weeks of job search, right at May when you're graduating or whenever that is. So I really wish that the process did start earlier. I mean, it technically should start freshman year so that it's all aligned with, okay, what does the person really want to do with their life? What classes should they take? Who should they speak to in the world of work? What kind of networking? What alumni can we introduce them to? What internships can they have? And so by the time you would get to your senior year, you'd have amassed all of that experience and knowledge that would make it so much easier then to be strategic about how you job search. And it goes back to having that target list of companies rather than just saying, who's hiring new graduates right now? What are the companies that I would want to work for? Because at the end of the day, a company is going to ask those graduates, and one of the interview questions, why do you want to work here?
Yeah.
And if the job seeker, if the college graduate can't answer that question well, then that's one of the reasons why I don't think they're really passionate about coming to work for me as an employer, and I might disregard them as a candidate. So I think the job seeker just has to take more control and be aware of where they want to work and what they want to do. And sometimes it's hard until they've had some experiences, but start somewhere with a company that you really would love to work for.
Absolutely, I agree with you. You have to start somewhere. If you do not take the first step, you're just not never gonna know.
Right.
And you might just kind of miss the bus on your dream job as such. And these job seekers, when they have a target list of companies, who are they supposed to go and target first? Is there like an HR head or somebody who's on the employee level? Who should they go and reach out to first?
That's a great question. I usually, like my preference, my recommendation is see if you know anybody who works inside that company first, right? And LinkedIn, again, makes that super simple to find out. You just look at the employees and see who you know. But if there isn't anybody you know, look for second level connections. Perhaps you know somebody who knows somebody inside that company. And it really, at this point, in this early stage of networking, it wouldn't matter so much what level or what role the person had. The fact is that they work inside that company. They'd be a good resource to give you information about what it's like to work there, and they then might be willing to introduce you to the person that you really need to speak to who works inside the department that you want to work for or the group that you want to work for. So and I think that's where job seekers get impatient. They want to go directly to, okay, who's the person who would hire me for this job? And they don't have any connection to that person. And that makes it really hard. They need that warm introduction that's going to make it that much easier for them to get a, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to talk to you. So if they really want to try and find somebody who can introduce, that they can meet, that will introduce them to get in there. I think, worst case scenario, there's a company that you want to work for and you don't know anybody. I think you could very strategically pick somebody who is in a role that would potentially hire you for the kind of job that you're looking for. Research them thoroughly on LinkedIn, see where they went to school, see what companies they worked for, see what other people have written about them in their recommendations, and then invite them to connect. So you could say in your invitation to connect, I've looked at your background. I saw that you went to the same school as I did, coincidentally. I'd love to talk with you about your experience working at XYZ company. Or I looked at your background and I'm really intrigued with the path and how you've achieved what you've done in your career. I'd love to talk with you about your work at XYZ company. So that would be the cold outreach, and sometimes those get ignored. But if you've done some research and you can draw that connection to how you know the person, or say something you know about the person, that gives them one more reason to say yes.
Yeah, I think it's almost like, finding the right customer for, let's say, your product, right? You just kind of, if you're really passionate and involved in it, you will do a lot of research. And I think a lot of job seekers, don't do that. They're lazy and they don't want to do a lot of research. And that's why they're unhappy.
Right, absolutely, and that's such a good point, because when you have companies that you think you would love to work for, or you'd love to work for, it makes it that much easier to do the research and to spend the time doing some of this stuff that seems sort of time consuming. So yeah.
Absolutely. And, currently looking at the crisis and, the coronavirus situation, what do you have to say to the graduates of this year? It's very unfortunate for them because they would be taking their first steps in their career. How are they supposed to brace for this situation, and any tips that would help them?
My heart bleeds, and we saw this happen too back in 2009 when we had the financial crisis, that a lot of the graduates just couldn't find employment. I think the situation was a little bit different back then. What I know is that there are buckets of and industries of companies that are still hiring around the world today, and they tend to fall into certain industries. So even though you may not have wanted to be in one of those top performing industries or the industries that are currently hiring, this might be a time just to say, I need something. Let me do more research on companies in these industries and find some that might be of interest to me. So those industries are typically in tech, anything IT, and you don't have to be a coder programmer to get a job in technology. These technology companies have the full gamut of everyone from, in finance to customer service and everything in between. So tech, healthcare, warehousing, those three industries right now we know are growing, and companies within those industries can be found in almost every city across the country, across the world. Find companies that are doing hiring in those areas, in your region, in your area, and then start looking for people inside those companies. I would say don't be too picky right off the bat. I think, as you said earlier, having some experience doing something after you graduate is better than not having any experience. You're going to learn a lot. It may not be the dream job, but just know you're not going to be there forever. It's just an opportunity to gain some work experience, learn a little bit about an industry, and then you'll take that experience with you wherever you go next. You'll use that cumulative knowledge and work processes and things that you've learned, and you'll be a more valuable employee down the road.
So you were talking about graduates kind of really trying to just not be too picky at this point in time, just to pick up whatever they can and try and get some experience.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
what about those people who are, who've been laid off? How must they go about looking for another job now?
Yeah, so the same advice would apply to them. We know that those industries that are hiring right now, and there's another one I should include. So it's technology, healthcare, warehousing, and finance, banking. All of those industries are hiring right now. And so if I were an unemployed job seeker, even though I had no experience in any of those industries, I would learn enough about those industries and be able to talk convincingly about my qualifications for roles that I might be qualified for in those industries. So I think there's going to be an industry shift that's going to need to happen for job seekers that need to work. I think the other thing is there's a short-term plan and a long-term plan. So if in the short term, if the job seeker really just needs income more than what they might make on unemployment or whatever they're getting, then there are lots of jobs available that are probably not the kinds of jobs that they would want long term, but there are jobs that can generate immediate income. So we know what those are. I mean, they're the delivery people and working in some of the food service industries that are still open, like grocery stores and things like that. And Amazon is doing a huge, every day they're hiring more people across the world. So those are not necessarily jobs you'd want to have long term per se, but they could be an opportunity to make immediate income. And again, it gives you something to do and to talk about while you've been unemployed. You can say, I took this job just to keep myself out there and to do something other than job search. So that would be like the main advice. I think that now is a great time for job seekers to reconnect and build relationships, or reconnect with and nurture relationships with people they used to work with along the way, or people that they've known but haven't really been in contact with for a while. Everyone's sort of stuck in the same holding pattern, not knowing what's going on. And so people do find they have a little bit more time on their hands, the ones that are not crazy busy, and that makes it a great time to reach out and send a quick note or an email or even a phone call or text and say, hey, just wondering how you're doing.
Absolutely, as you said, it's time to build relationships and even kind of improve their skills, or just get better at learning, gain more knowledge, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of free and low cost online training that's available right now, so definitely take advantage of that, because we all have skill gaps, and so this is a great time to build up some of those skills. Great point.
Absolutely. And then I think, they will be much more ready to get jobs, because the competition is going to be high. And there's going to be a lot of, kind of friction and a lot of jobs. There will be a surge of candidates. So you need to kind of be prepped up for being the best. And that's going to take time. So absolutely, I think that makes a lot of sense. And especially you spoke about the gig economy as well, because it's gaining momentum. Now, do you think that that's going to change in the future? Do you think that after we are done with the pandemic, this whole scenario of jobs and workplaces that involve gig economy, they're gonna kind of be different?
So I wish I wish I had the crystal ball and I could tell you for sure. We don't know for sure. But what we do know is that companies now have been forced to experiment with remote workers. And I think they're going to find that it's not so bad having remote workers. It actually can work. So I love the fact that companies are being forced to experiment with this, because I think that can open up doors for a lot of people, not just locally, but it opens up, the company actually benefits a lot too. The employee benefits because they don't have to spend the money commuting. It gives them more flexibility in their work style, but the employer benefits because they can choose from a broader work pool. They can look anywhere in the world for people who have those skills. And I think that challenge for us as individual workers is to say, okay, I'm not just competing against people in my geographic region, I'm competing globally. So my skills and what I do to market and promote myself has to be really top notch, because I need to stand out. The competition is out across the world now. So that does make it a little bit more challenging. But as far as gig economy, which is sort of different than remote, because sometimes people can be freelancing or working remotely, two different things. I love the idea of having multiple pools of income, and I call it, it's been called portfolio careers, where you don't put all of your financial eggs in one basket, because when you do that and you lose that job, then you're where you are today without a job and panicking. But if you have a portfolio career or a series of gigs, then you can turn them up and amp them down based on the work that you have going on. And that puts me, the employee, in the driver's seat. And that's always where I want us to be, in a position of power, rather than waiting for a company to hire me. I can go out there. It takes some hustle, I'm not going to lie, but you can go out there and find and create opportunities to do the kind of work that you want to do. So I think gig work has been growing, and I think it will continue to grow. I'm not sure if a company would ever take full advantage of gig workers, but in certain companies and certain industry, certain roles, it makes more sense to bring somebody in for a project or a gig rather than have them come on for a full-time job. And so again, the employee, the job seeker, the new college graduate really needs to do some research around, okay, what are the kinds of jobs that are well suited to gig work, or could my job become gig work in the future? And with some research and talking to people, I think they'll have a better understanding of what the viability is moving forward.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. The gig economy is on the rise, and we will have to be inclusive of them so that we can move ahead in the future. And to kind of wrap this up, I'm going to ask you if you have any other important sound bites that you'd like to leave our viewers with.
I'm just going to piggyback sort of on what I was saying before, because I believe that we as an employee are in control of our destiny and in control of our career. And if we take the mindset of, okay, my career is my business, and we use all the same philosophies and principles that a business owner would use to promote their business and to take care of their business, and we apply those to ourselves, I think that that's the right level of focus to have. In other words, if I'm a business, I need to make sure that I am up on the latest technology and I'm using that. I need to make sure that I'm prepared for whatever changes come down the road next, and that I can pivot and change and adapt and adjust to keep building and growing my business. And I need to continue to get the word out about the great work that my company is doing. So if somebody as an individual keeps that mindset that they are a business of one, then they are going to probably be long-term more successful in managing the career and feeling more fulfilled because they have control over it.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you so much for sharing your views with us, Hannah. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure a lot of job seekers out there will benefit from your advice, from the tips that you've given. So it's been a learning experience for all of us, and thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you so much, and be well. Thanks so much for the opportunity to talk with you.
Of course. Thank you so much for your time. Stay safe and have a healthy time ahead of you, and have a great day ahead.
Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.